Have mercy on us. A true story from Mexico. This is a true story. Everything I'm about to tell you happened to my family in Mexico starting on a Friday night at exactly 11:47 p.m. I know the exact time because my mother was staring at the clock when it stopped. She told me later that she had never seen a clock simply freeze before. The second hand just stopped moving, hovering between one moment and the next, as if time itself had decided to pause and watch what was about to happen next. That clock had hung on the same wall for 30 years. My stepfather Roberto had given it to my mother as an anniversary gift back when I was still a teenager struggling through high school. It was nothing special to look at just a simple wooden frame with brass numbers and a gentle tick that had become part of the house's heartbeat. For 3 decades it had never stopped. Not during power outages, not during earthquakes, not during the worst storms that swept through our town. Until that Friday night. My mother had lived in that house for 30 years. 30 years without a single strange occurrence. No creaking floors that could not be explained by the old wooden beams settling in the cool night air. No shadows flickering in the corner of her eye that could not be attributed to passing cars or shifting curtains. No cold spots that made her skin prickle with unexplained dread. No objects moving from where she had placed them. No doors opening on their own. No whispers in empty rooms. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The house had always been exactly what it appeared to be, a modest home at the edge of a quiet neighborhood filled with the accumulated memories of a family that had grown up within its walls. There were marks on the doorframe of the kitchen where my mother had measured our heights as children. There were scratches on the wooden floors from the time my brother and I had tried to ride our bicycles inside during a rainstorm. Every imperfection told a story. Every corner held a memory. But the moment my mother was left alone for the first time in her life, something woke up. And here is what terrifies me the most. By the end of this story, you will understand that we did not defeat it. We did not banish it. We did not send it back to wherever it came from. We did not find some ancient ritual or sacred prayer that could drive it away. We just passed it on to someone else. And I have no idea who is next. My name is Diego. I work in an office in Mexico City, pushing papers and attending meetings that could have been emails. I have a wife, a small apartment in a building that always smells faintly of the tamales our downstairs neighbor makes every Sunday, and a life that was completely ordinary until 2 months ago. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that I am not the kind of person who believes in ghosts. I was not raised on scary stories or tales of vengeful spirits. I did not spend my childhood afraid of the dark. I was a practical, logical, the kind of man who explained away every strange noise with a rational cause. That changed. Everything changed. My mother, Carmen, is 63 years old. She is a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair that she keeps pinned up in a neat bun, and hands that are rough from decades of hard work. She raised 3 children almost entirely on her own after my father left when I was still learning to walk. I have no memory of him, only the stories my mother refused to tell and the silence that filled the space where his name should have been. When I was 7, she married again. Roberto was a kind man, quiet and steady, who worked as a mechanic at a shop on the other side of town. He never tried to replace my father or pretend that he had always been part of our family. He simply showed up day after day, fixing things that were broken and building things that were needed, and loving my mother with a patience that I did not fully appreciate until I was much older. He became the only father I ever knew, and when he died 5 years ago from cancer that had spread too far, before anyone noticed, I felt like I had lost a part of myself that I could never get back. My mother buried him in the small cemetery at the edge of our town, in a plot beneath an old oak tree that provided shade in the summer. She visited him every Sunday without fail, bringing fresh flowers and sitting on a small bench nearby. She would talk to him for hours, telling him about her week, about the children and grandchildren, about the small dramas and quiet joys that made up her life. My older brother Miguel lives 15 minutes from our mother's house in a neighborhood that had been farmland when we were children, but had since been swallowed by the expanding city. He has a wife named Isabel and 2 young children who fill his weekends with soccer games and birthday parties. Miguel works as an engineer for a construction company designing bridges and overpasses that will outlast all of us. My younger sister, Lucia, had just turned 19 when this story begins. She had moved to Mexico City 3 months earlier to attend university, leaving our mother alone in that house for the first time in 3 decades. Lucia was studying psychology, fascinated by the hidden workings of the human mind. She had always been the sensitive one, the child who cried during sad movies and adopted stray animals and wrote poetry in journals she kept hidden under her mattress. With Lucia gone, the house that had once been full of children and noise and life was now silent. My mother was alone for the first time since she was a young woman, and none of us realized how significant that was until it was too late. The house sits at the edge of our neighborhood at the end of a street that sees little traffic. It is the last house before the road turns to dirt and eventually disappears into the hills that rise to the east of town. The street lights are sparse out there, spaced far enough apart that you can see the stars on clear nights, and the nearest neighbors are far enough away that you could scream at the top of your lungs and no one would hear you. When I was a child, I loved that about our home. The darkness felt peaceful, like a blanket that wrapped around the house and kept us safe from the busy world beyond. I would sit on the roof with Miguel during meteor showers, watching streaks of light paint the sky while the rest of the town slept. Now I understand that isolation differently. Now I know that when something goes wrong in a place like that, there is no one close enough to hear you scream. So when my mother called me on that Wednesday afternoon, 5 days after the clock stopped, and asked me to come home, I knew something was terribly wrong. It was a Wednesday, like I said. I was at my desk in the office staring at a spreadsheet that had begun to blur before my eyes. My phone buzzed against the desk and I glanced at the screen without much interest. Then I saw the name, Mama. My mother does not call during work hours. She knows my schedule, knows I'm busy, knows I will call her back on my lunch break or in the evening. In 30 years, I could count on one hand the number of times she had interrupted my workday. Each of those times had been an emergency. I answered immediately. Her voice was calm. That was the first thing I noticed. Not panicked, not breathless, not choked with tears, just calm. But underneath that calm was something else, something I had never heard from my mother before. It took me a moment to identify it. Fear. "Diego," she said. "Can you come home?" "What's wrong? Are you hurt? Are you sick?" "No, I'm not hurt." "Then what is it?" She paused. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, slow and deliberate, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "There's someone in the house." My blood went cold. I pictured burglars, home invaders, violent criminals who had targeted an elderly woman living alone at the end of a deserted street. "A burglar? Have you called the police? Get out of the house." "It's not a burglar." Another pause. "I don't know what it is. But there's something here. I can feel it. I've been feeling it for days." I wanted to ask more questions, but something in her tone stopped me. This was not a conversation to have over the phone. "I'll be there as soon as I can," I said. "Stay safe, Mama. I'm coming." "I will, but Diego." She hesitated, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "Don't turn on the lights when you get here. Use candles." "I know it sounds strange, but please trust me. I'll explain when you arrive." She hung up before I could ask what she meant. I called Miguel immediately. He answered on the second ring, and before I could say anything, he spoke first. "Mama called you too." "Just now? What the hell is going on?" "I don't know." His voice was tight. "She called me about an hour ago, said the same thing. There's something in the house. She's been feeling it for days. I'm already on my way. I should be there in 10 minutes. Did she tell you about the lights? Yeah. I have no idea what that's about. But she sounded serious, more serious than I've ever heard her. So I'm bringing candles from the emergency kit. I told him I would be there as fast as I could, but Mexico City traffic being what it is, I knew it would take me at least an hour. Miguel promised to call me once he arrived. That hour was the longest of my life. I sat in traffic watching the sun sink lower in the sky and tried to convince myself that there was a rational explanation for all of this. Maybe my mother was experiencing some kind of breakdown. She had been alone for months now, ever since Lucia left. The house that had once been full of children and noise and life was now silent. Perhaps the solitude had finally gotten to her. But even as I thought it, I knew it was not true. My mother was the most grounded person I had ever known. If she said there was something in the house, then there was something in the house. I just had no idea what. When I finally arrived, the sun had set completely. The street was dark, illuminated only by the distant glow of streetlights that seemed dimmer than I remembered. My mother's house sat at the end of the road like a shadow against the night sky. Every window was dark, not a single light shone from inside, not the porch light that my mother always left on for visitors. Not the lamp in the living room. Nothing. The house was completely, utterly dark. The curtains were drawn tight across every window, something I had never seen before. My mother loved natural light. She had never been one to hide behind closed curtains. But now every window was covered as if someone had deliberately sealed the house against the outside world. Miguel's car was parked in front, which meant he had been inside for nearly an hour. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I walked up the front path, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. The sound seemed too loud in the silence. The night was unnaturally quiet, no crickets chirping, no dogs barking in the distance. Just silence, thick and heavy. I reached for the door handle and found it unlocked. The moment I stepped inside, the darkness swallowed me whole. I had grown up in this house. I knew every corner, every piece of furniture, every creaky floorboard. But standing in that darkness, I felt like a stranger. The house I had known for 30 years had become something else, something alien and unwelcoming. The air was thick, heavy in a way I could not explain. It pressed against my skin like a physical weight. And there was a smell, faint but unmistakable, like old earth and rotting leaves and something else I could not identify. By instinct, I reached for the light switch. My fingers found it, and I was about to flip it on when I remembered my mother's warning. Don't turn on the lights. Use candles. I hesitated. Part of me screamed to just turn on the light. But something held me back, some ancient instinct that kept my ancestors alive in the darkness. I lowered my hand and stepped away from the switch. Instead, I walked toward the living room, my hands stretched out in front of me. The curtains were drawn, blocking out even the faint glow of the streetlights. I reached for them, thinking that at least the moonlight might help me see. I pulled the curtain open, and immediately I felt it. It hit me like a wave, like someone had dropped a boulder onto my chest. My lungs seized. I could not breathe. My knees buckled, and I stumbled backward, crashing into the coffee table. But it was not just the physical sensation that overwhelmed me. It was the emotion, a sadness so profound, so absolute that it felt like drowning, like someone had taken every happy memory I had ever had and burned them to ash. Like everyone I had ever loved was dead and gone, and I was completely alone in the world. I fell onto the sofa, gasping for air that would not come. My vision blurred. I could feel tears streaming down my face, though I did not know why I was crying. "Close it. Close the curtain." My mother's voice from somewhere above me. Urgent. Terrified. Then Miguel was there, appearing from the shadows. His face was pale in the faint light. He grabbed the curtain and yanked it closed, plunging the room back into darkness. And just like that, I could breathe again. The weight lifted from my chest. The sadness retreated, not entirely, but enough that I could think. enough that I could sit up and wipe the tears from my face with shaking hands. "You felt it," Miguel said. It was not a question. I nodded, still too shaken to speak. "Come upstairs, Mama will explain everything." I followed him through the darkness up the stairs I had climbed 1,000 times as a child. Miguel carried a single candle, its flame barely enough to light our way. The shadows stretched and twisted in ways that made my skin crawl. We reached my mother's bedroom. She was sitting on the bed, a candle on the nightstand beside her. In its dim glow, I almost did not recognize her. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the week since I had last seen her. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles that looked almost like bruises. Her hands trembled slightly. "Sit down," she said. "I'll tell you everything. And I need you to believe me even if it sounds impossible." She told us about that Friday night when the clock stopped at 11:47. How she had been reading in the living room when she happened to glance up at the clock. How she had watched the second hand freeze in place. How she had assumed the battery had died. And then she told us about the feeling. "It came out of nowhere," she said. "One moment I was fine. The next moment it was like the air had changed, like gravity had doubled. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't cooperate." She paused, her eyes distant. "And then came the sadness. I have been sad before, when your father left, when Roberto died. But this was different. This was not my sadness. It felt like someone was pouring despair into me from the outside. I started crying and I couldn't stop. I thought I was dying." "What did you do?" I asked. "I managed to crawl outside. The moment I crossed the threshold, it lifted. Not completely, but enough. I sat in the backyard until the sun came up. I was too afraid to go back inside." Miguel stepped forward. "Why didn't you call us?" "Because I thought I was losing my mind. I thought it was just stress or loneliness. I convinced myself that if I just faced it, it would go away." "But it didn't go away," I said. "No, it got worse. Every night the feeling grew stronger. Every night I discovered something new about it." She looked at both of us. "The darkness helps. When all the lights are off, the feeling is bearable. But the moment any light comes in, it becomes unbearable. Except for candles. Candlelight doesn't make it worse." "The cats," I said suddenly. "Where are the cats?" My mother's expression grew troubled. "They ran out that first night and never came back inside. They sleep on the roof now. I put food out for them every day in the backyard, but they won't cross the doorway no matter how much I call them. Animals always know. They can sense things we cannot. If the cats refused to enter the house, then whatever was in here was real." "Have you seen anything?" Miguel asked. "Heard anything?" My mother was quiet for a long moment. "Footsteps on the stairs. They come down part way and then stop, always at the same step, the 7th one from the top. And sometimes when I'm sitting alone in the dark, I can feel someone watching me, not from outside, from inside the house, like there's someone standing in every corner just beyond the candlelight waiting." I thought about the house I had grown up in, the house that had always felt safe. It did not feel safe anymore. "Mama," I said slowly, "have you thought about leaving? You could stay with Miguel or come to the city with me." Her eyes hardened. "This is my home. I raised you here. Roberto died here. 30 years of memories are in these walls. I won't let anything drive me out." She paused. "But I can't stay here alone anymore. That's why I called you. I need to know I'm not crazy." I squeezed her hand. It was ice cold. "You're not crazy. I've felt it too. Whatever's happening here, it's real." She looked at me, and for the first time since I arrived, I saw hope in her eyes. "You believe me?" "I believe you." Miguel stepped forward. "We'll figure this out, Mama. We'll stay with you. We'll take turns. You won't be alone again." My mother nodded, and some of the tension drained from her shoulders, but even as I made that promise, I felt a chill run down my spine, not from the cold, from the certainty that somewhere in this house, in one of the dark corners we could not see, something was listening. something that had been waiting for a very long time, and now that we were here, it was not going to let us leave. The first night we stayed with our mother, Miguel, and I made a plan. We would take turns, one of us with her each night, so she would never be alone again. It seemed simple enough. We had no idea what we were dealing with, but we told ourselves that our presence would be enough. We were wrong. I went home that first night to explain things to my wife. I told her that my mother was unwell, that she needed someone to stay with her for a while. I did not tell her about the darkness, about the weight that had crushed my chest, about the tears I could not explain. How could I? She would have thought I was losing my mind. Miguel stayed behind. He called me around midnight, his voice strained but steady. Nothing had happened, he said. The house was quiet. Our mother had fallen asleep, and he was sitting in the living room with a single candle, watching the shadows dance on the walls. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to my wife breathe beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that weight pressing down on me again. The second night was my turn. I arrived at the house just before sunset, carrying a bag of candles and a change of clothes. My mother met me at the door. She looked slightly better than the night before, though the dark circles under her eyes had not faded. She had slept, she told me, really slept for the first time in days. Having Miguel there had helped. We ate dinner in the kitchen by candlelight. My mother had prepared pozole, the same recipe she had made for us every Sunday when we were children. The smell of hominy and pork filled the small room, and for a moment I could almost pretend that everything was normal. But then the sun set and the feeling returned. It crept in slowly like water seeping through a crack in the wall. One moment I was eating, laughing at something my mother said about Lucia's phone calls from the university. The next moment I felt it, that familiar pressure building in my chest, that sadness coiling around my heart. My mother noticed the change in my expression. She stopped mid-sentence and reached across the table to touch my hand. "It's stronger tonight," she said quietly. "I can feel it too." We finished eating in silence and moved to the living room. I had brought a book, thinking I could distract myself with reading, but the words blurred before my eyes. I could not concentrate. Every few seconds I found myself looking over my shoulder, certain that someone was standing behind me. But whenever I turned, there was nothing, just darkness and the faint smell of candle wax. Around 9 o'clock, my phone started acting strange. I had been texting my wife, letting her know I was fine, when the screen began to flicker. The battery, which had been at 80% when I arrived, suddenly dropped to 15, then 10, then 5. I watched the numbers fall in real time, as if something was draining the power from my device. "That happens," my mother said when I showed her. "Electronics don't work right in here anymore." I stepped outside to call Miguel. Immediately the phone worked perfectly, full signal, battery holding steady. When I turned back toward the house, I saw my mother standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint glow of candlelight. "Don't stay out too long," she said. "It knows when we leave." That night, around 2 in the morning, I heard the footsteps for the first time. I was sitting in the armchair in my mother's room, fighting to stay awake. She was asleep in her bed, her breathing slow and even. The candle on the nightstand had burned down to a stub. The footsteps came from the hallway. Slow, deliberate, one step, then another, then another. They were moving toward the stairs. I held my breath, straining to listen. The footsteps reached the top of the staircase and began to descend. I counted them in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No creaking floorboards, no settling of the old house, just a void where sound should have been. I sat frozen in the chair, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Part of me wanted to get up, to walk to the door, to see what was standing on that 7th step. But a larger part of me screamed to stay still, to not move, to not draw attention. After what felt like hours, the footsteps resumed going back up. I listened until they faded into silence somewhere above. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. My mother stirred in her sleep but did not wake. I sat there until dawn, watching the door, waiting for something that never came. The third day after I arrived, my mother asked her cousin Sophia to visit. Sophia was 45 years old, an accountant who lived on the other side of the city. She was practical to a fault, the kind of woman who balanced her checkbook to the centavo and scheduled her life in 15-minute increments. If anyone would tell my mother that she was imagining things, it would be Sophia. That was exactly why my mother invited her. She needed someone outside the family to confirm what she was experiencing. Sophia arrived at 3 in the afternoon when the sun was still high and the house felt almost normal. My mother had told her nothing. No warnings about the lights, no explanation of what had been happening. She simply invited her over for coffee and conversation. I was not there when Sophia arrived. I was at work. But my mother told me everything later, and Sophia confirmed it when I called her that night. Sophia knew something was wrong the moment she stepped through the front door. She could not explain it. The house just felt different. Heavy, like the air itself had thickened. Then she saw the cats on the roof. Sophia had known those cats for years. They had always been friendly, always rubbed against her ankles when she visited, but now they sat on the roof in a line, staring down at her with wide, frightened eyes. When she called to them, they did not move. About an hour into the visit, Sophia asked if she could turn on a light. The candlelight was giving her a headache, she said. My mother hesitated, then nodded. Sophia walked to the lamp beside the sofa and switched it on. The effect was immediate. She told me later that it felt like being hit by a truck. One moment she was fine. The next moment she was on her knees, gasping for air, tears streaming down her face. The sadness was overwhelming. It was not her sadness. It was like someone had injected pure misery directly into her veins. My mother turned off the lamp and the feeling subsided. Sophia sat on the floor, trembling, unable to speak. They talked for another hour after that, my mother explaining everything she had discovered about the rules of this haunting. Then they heard a door slam from upstairs. Footsteps, moving toward the stairs. Sophia, despite every instinct telling her to run, picked up a candle and walked toward the stairs. She climbed to the 7th step and stopped. She told me she could not see anything, but she could feel something standing directly in front of her, 2 steps above. She could feel its presence like a physical force. She could feel its breath, cold, damp, smelling faintly of earth and something rotten. Sophia ran out of the house and never came back. The 4th night was my turn again. Miguel had stayed the 3rd night, and nothing significant had happened beyond the usual. The footsteps came and went. The pressure waxed and waned with the darkness. But nothing new. I arrived at sunset, hoping for another quiet night. I should have known better. My mother went to bed early, exhausted from the stress and the sleepless nights. I sat in the living room with a candle, watching the shadows and trying not to think about what might be watching me back. Around midnight I heard it, a whisper, so close it seemed to come from right beside my ear. So quiet I almost missed it. Ten piedad de nosotros. I jerked upright, spinning around in my chair. There was no one there, just darkness and shadows. But I'd heard it, clear as day, someone whispering in my ear, the Lord's Prayer, in Spanish. Have mercy on us! I grabbed my candle and stood up, my heart pounding. Whatever had spoken was close, too close. Who's there? I demanded, my voice cracking. Silence. I stood there for what felt like hours, listening to the silence, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Eventually I sat back down, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the candle. I did not sleep that night. The 5th night was Miguel's turn. He arrived late, around 9, because he could not leave work any earlier. My mother was already exhausted and went to bed immediately. Miguel lit some candles in the kitchen and made himself dinner. He was eating when he noticed the tape. We had covered all the windows with black tape to block out the streetlights. Even that small amount of light seemed to make things worse. But now, as Miguel sat at the kitchen table, he saw that one corner of the tape had come loose. A thin sliver of light from the street was seeping through. He was about to get up and fix it when he saw her. A figure was standing at the window, silhouetted against that sliver of light. Her back was to him. She seemed to be looking outside, peering through the tiny gap in the tape. Miguel's first thought was that our mother had gotten up. "Mama," he called. The figure did not respond, did not move. Miguel stood up slowly. His heart was beating fast, but he told himself there was nothing to worry about. It was just our mother. She probably could not sleep. But as he took a step closer, he noticed something wrong. Her hair. Our mother always wears her hair up, always, in a bun or a braid, never loose. It has been that way for as long as I can remember. The figure at the window had long hair hanging loose around her shoulders. Miguel stopped moving. A cold sensation crept up his spine. "Mama," he said again, but his voice came out as a whisper. The figure laughed. It was a small sound, almost amused, but there was nothing funny about that laugh. It was too high, too thin, too wrong. Miguel took a step backward. The figure turned her head slightly as if she had heard him move, and then she ran. Not toward him, toward the wall. She moved with a speed that should have been impossible crossing the kitchen in a blur of shadow. Miguel screamed. He expected her to crash into the wall. Instead, she went through it, like the wall was made of water, like it was not even there. She simply ran into it and disappeared, leaving nothing behind but the echo of Miguel's scream. From upstairs, he heard our mother's voice calling out, asking what was wrong. He told her he had seen a mouse, that it had startled him, that everything was fine. But nothing was fine. We both knew that now. Whatever was in this house, it could be seen. It could move through walls, and it looked like our mother. Miguel called me at 3 a.m. I could hear the terror in his voice as he tried to explain what had happened. But there was something else he told me that night, something that made my blood run cold. Before the figure had run through the wall, before it had laughed, Miguel had noticed one more thing. She'd been reaching towards something on the wall, a photograph. The photograph of Lucia from her confirmation ceremony. When Miguel went to look at it after the figure disappeared, the photograph was gone. The frame was still there, hanging crooked on the wall, but the picture inside was missing, and we had no idea why. That same night, around 4 a.m, my phone rang. It was Lucia. She was hundreds of kilometers away in Mexico City, but she sounded terrified. "Diego, something happened," she said. "I need to talk to you. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. She paused. "Last night you called me. Around 1 a.m. You asked if I was okay, if anything strange had happened. But you sounded weird, really worried, and then you just hung up." I felt the room spin around me. "Lucia, I didn't call you last night. I was here at Mama's house. I didn't call anyone." Silence on the other end of the line. Then in a small voice, "But it was your number. I saw it on my screen." "Lucia, listen to me carefully. Where are you right now?" "I'm at the vacation house." "Remember, I told you I was going away with my friends for the weekend. But Diego, something weird happened here too." "Tell me." She took a deep breath. "Last night, Elena and I had the same dream. Exactly the same. We both dreamed that there was a woman standing at the bottom of the swimming pool, just standing there looking up at us through the water. And then she started walking out of the pool toward the house, toward our room." My hand tightened around the phone. "And then we woke up, both of us at the same time. We were so freaked out that we called some friends who lived nearby. But when we went outside to wait for them, we saw something." "What did you see?" "Footprints. Wet footprints. Leading from the pool to the back door of the house, to the door of our bedroom." I could not speak. "There's something else," Lucia continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "One of the guys who came to help us, he said he saw something in the hallway. Something that looked like a woman in a white dress, but when he looked directly at it, it was gone. Lucia, listen to me. I need you to come home. Right now. Get in the car and drive straight here. Diego, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'll explain everything when you get here. Just please come home." She agreed. She said she would leave within the hour, that she would bring her friend Daniel, who had been driving. When I hung up, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was in this house, it had followed Lucia all the way to the vacation house. It was not confined to this place. It could go anywhere. The next morning, Miguel and I sat with our mother and told her everything. About the figure that looked like her. About the missing photograph. About Lucia's phone call and the wet footprints at the vacation house. My mother listened in silence. When we finished, she said something that surprised us both. "I called your Uncle Thomas yesterday. He's coming this morning." Tomas was her cousin, though he was young enough to be her son. He had converted to a different faith years ago, had studied religion and spirituality in ways the rest of our family never had. If anyone could help us understand what was happening, it would be him. "He'll be here at 7, she said. "And I think he might know what this is." I wanted to feel hopeful, but deep down I knew we were in over our heads. Whatever was in this house had been here longer than any of us, and it was not going to let us go without a fight. Tomas arrived at 7 in the morning, just as the first light of dawn was washing the fear from the house. He drove an old pickup truck that rattled and coughed as it pulled into the driveway, and when he stepped out, I was struck by how ordinary he looked. He was a small man, thin and wiry, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He wore simple clothes, no religious garments, no crosses or symbols. But there was something about the way he carried himself. A calm certainty that radiated from him like heat from a fire. When he embraced my mother at the door, I saw some of the tension drain from her shoulders. We gathered in the kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the windows we had finally dared to uncover. In the daylight, the house almost felt normal, but I could still sense something lurking at the edges, waiting for the sun to set. Tomas listened as we told him everything. The footsteps on the stairs, the figure that looked like my mother, the photograph of Lucia that had vanished, the whispered prayer in my ear. He did not interrupt, just nodded occasionally and sipped the coffee my mother had made. When we finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he set down his cup and looked at my mother. "Carmen," he said, his voice soft but steady, "before I tell you what I think is happening, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." My mother nodded, her hands wrapped tight around her own cup. "When you were a child, did you have an imaginary friend?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at Miguel, who seemed equally confused, but my mother's reaction was different. Her face went pale. Her hands began to tremble. "Why do you ask that?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I think it matters. I think it might be the key to everything." My mother was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotions I could not identify. "Yes, I had an imaginary friend. When I was very young, maybe 3 or 4 years old. I don't remember much about it, just that I used to talk to someone no one else could see. By the time I started school, I had stopped." Tomas nodded, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "Did your mother ever tell you anything else? Anything about your birth?" My mother's cup clattered against the table. Coffee splashed across the wood, but she did not seem to notice. "How do you know about that?" she demanded. "Your mother told me. Before she died, she made me promise to keep it secret, but I think the time for secrets has passed." Miguel leaned forward. "What secret, Mama? What is he talking about?" Tomas took a deep breath. "When Carmen was born, she was not alone. There was another baby. A twin sister." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my stomach drop. "What happened to her?" I heard myself ask. "She died," Tomas said quietly. "A few hours after birth. She was too small, too weak. Her lungs never fully developed." My mother made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. Tears were streaming down her face. "But here is the important part," Tomas continued. "The baby died before she could be named, before she could be baptized. In our traditions that matters. A child who dies without a name, without blessing, their soul becomes trapped. They cannot move on. They remain in a kind of limbo, caught between this world and the next. I thought about the whispered prayer in my ear. Ten piedad de nosotros. Have mercy on us. Not me, us. You're saying that my mother's twin sister has been here this whole time? I asked. For 50 years, Thomas nodded. I believe so. Your grandmother always suspected it. She told me that when Carmen was young, she would talk to someone only she could see. Your grandmother thought it was just imagination, but part of her always wondered if it was her other daughter staying close to her twin. But why now? Miguel demanded. Why is all this happening now? Because for 50 years, Carmen was never alone. First she lived with her parents. Then she married, had children. There was always someone else in the house. The spirit had to share Carmen's attention. He turned to look at my mother. But then Roberto died, and your children grew up and moved away. And finally, Lucia left for university. For the first time in 50 years, Carmen was completely alone, and the spirit finally had her sister all to herself. My mother was crying openly now. She just wanted to be seen. All this time she just wanted me to know she was there. Perhaps, Thomas said, but spirits like this, they do not just want acknowledgement. They want connection. They want to be part of the family they were denied, and sometimes in their desperation they can become dangerous. He paused, his expression darkening. The photograph of Lucia. Why do you think she took it? None of us had an answer. Because Lucia reminds her of what she lost. A life, a chance to grow up. She sees in Lucia everything she could have been. And I fear that her interest in your daughter may not be entirely benevolent. Before anyone could respond, we heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Lucia climbing out of a dusty sedan, her face pale. Daniel was with her, a tall young man with a serious face who refused to leave her side. Elena had stayed behind with other friends, too shaken by what had happened at the vacation house to come anywhere near our family. They had made it. But as Lucia walked toward the house, I noticed something that made my heart sink. She looked exhausted, haunted. Whatever had happened at the vacation house had left its mark on her. We brought them inside and explained everything, the twin sister, the limbo, the 50 years of waiting. Lucia listened in silence, her hand gripping Daniel so tightly her knuckles turned white. So, the woman in the pool, she said slowly. The wet footprints, that was your aunt, my mother whispered. The sister I never knew I had. Tomas stood up. Tonight, when the sun sets, we will hold a ceremony. Not an exorcism, a welcoming. We will invite her to join us to be part of this family. And then we will pray for her soul so that she can finally find peace. It sounded too simple. After everything we had experienced, it seemed impossible that the solution could be so gentle. But what choice did we have? We spent the day preparing. Tomas had brought supplies, white candles, blessed water, a photograph of my mother as a young girl. As the sun began its descent, we gathered in the living room and took our places around a circle of candles. My mother, Miguel, Lucia, Daniel, Thomas, and me. 6 people preparing to face something that had haunted our family for half a century. Whatever happens, Thomas said quietly, do not break the circle. Do not open your eyes unless I tell you to. And whatever you hear, do not be afraid. Fear is what feeds her. Love is what will set her free. We closed our eyes. Tomas began to pray. His voice was low and rhythmic, the words flowing together like water. I recognized some of them fragments of prayers I had learned as a child. Others were unfamiliar ancient invocations in languages I did not know. The pressure in my chest grew stronger. The air grew colder. I could feel something gathering around us, drawn by the prayers like moths to a flame. 10 minutes passed. 20. Thomas continued to pray, his voice never wavering. The candles flickered their flames, dancing in a wind that should not have existed inside the house. And then Lucia spoke. I can see her. My eyes flew open before I could stop myself, and I saw her too. She was standing just outside the circle of candles watching us. In the flickering light, I could see her clearly for the first time. She wore a white dress, old and tattered like a hospital gown. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, long and dark and tangled. Her skin was pale, almost gray, but her face was what made my blood freeze. It was my mother's face, but wrong, distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. The features were the same, but they had been stretched and twisted by decades of loneliness and despair. The eyes were sunken, the cheeks hollow. And yet beneath all that horror I could see something else, something human, something sad. She was looking at my mother with an expression of such desperate longing that it made my heart ache. "Rosa," my mother said. The word seemed to hit the spirit like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her eyes widening. "That's your name," my mother continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'm giving you a name, Rosa. It means rose. It was our grandmother's name." Rosa stood perfectly still. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "I didn't know about you," my mother said. "They never told me. But I remember you. I remember playing with you when I was little. You were my best friend, my sister." Rosa took a step forward. Her movements were jerky, unnatural. But there was something almost tentative about them, almost hopeful. "I'm sorry," my mother whispered. "I'm sorry you were alone for so long, but I know now. We all know, and we want you to be part of our family." Rosa opened her mouth again. This time sound came out, a ragged whisper. "Want to stay with you? I know, and you can stay. You'll always be part of us, but you don't have to be trapped anymore. You can rest now. You can be free." For a moment I thought it was working. Rosa's expression softened. She took another step forward, reaching out toward my mother. And then everything went wrong. The candles exploded. Not extinguished, exploded. The flames shot up toward the ceiling, then died all at once, plunging us into absolute darkness. Lucia screamed. Daniel shouted something I could not understand. And then I heard them. The voices, not one voice, dozens, maybe hundreds, all whispering the same words over and over. "Ten piedad de nosotros. Ten piedad de nosotros. Have mercy on us. Have mercy on us." I scrambled to my feet, reaching for anyone. All around us, the whispers continued, growing louder, more insistent. "Tomas!" I shouted. "What's happening?" His voice came from somewhere to my left. "She's not alone. Rosa was never alone. There are others. Many others." "What others?" "Children. Children like her. Unnamed. Unbaptized. Lost between worlds. They found her. They've been gathering here for years, drawn to her presence. And now that we've opened a door—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. We had not just invited Rosa to be part of our family. We had invited all of them. I pulled out my phone, desperate for any source of light. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale glow across the room. And in that glow, I saw them. Children. Everywhere. Standing in every corner, sitting on every piece of furniture, crowding the doorways and windows. They were all sizes, all ages from infants to adolescents. They all wore white. They all had pale, waterlogged skin, hollow eyes, desperate expressions. And they were all looking at me. One of them stepped forward, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Her hair was dark and matted. Her dress was torn and stained. She reached out toward me with one small hand. "Papa," she whispered. I stumbled backward. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor, the light spinning wildly before going dark. And in the darkness they swarmed. I felt them everywhere, small hands touching my face, my arms, my legs, cold breath on my neck, whispered words in languages I did not understand, pleas and prayers that had gone unanswered for decades. The weight on my chest became unbearable. I could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stand there as the children pressed against me, around me, through me. I fell. I do not remember hitting the ground. I only remember the darkness swallowing me whole and the whispers fading to silence and the feeling of small, cold fingers closing around my heart. I woke up in my mother's bedroom. Sunlight was streaming through the window. I was lying on the bed, covered with a blanket, my head pounding. There was a bandage on my forehead, sticky with medicine. Miguel was sitting in a chair beside me. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his face covered in scratches. "Thank God," he said. "We thought we lost you. What happened?" "You collapsed, hit your head on the corner of the table. There was blood everywhere. We couldn't wake you up. The children, there were so many of them." Miguel nodded, his face grim. "We all saw them. Then they were on top of us, touching us, whispering. How did we get out? We didn't. Not really. We all ended up in this room somehow. Tomas thinks the spirits pushed us here. We barricaded the door and prayed until the sun came up. And then they were gone, just like that. One moment the house was full of them, the next it was empty." I sat up slowly, my head swimming. "Where is everyone?" "Mama is downstairs with Tomas. Lucia and Daniel are in the living room. Everyone's okay. Shaken up, but okay." I walked to the window and looked outside. The sun was high in the sky. The street was quiet and peaceful. It all looked so normal. And then I saw it. The house across the street. The house where old man Guillermo lived alone. Every window was covered with cardboard and black plastic. The front door was closed, the curtains drawn. On the roof sat a shape that might have been a cat, and on the sidewalk Guillermo's dog was pacing back and forth, whining softly. It kept looking at the front door, then backing away. It would not go inside. "Miguel," I said slowly, "come look at this." He joined me at the window. For a long moment neither of us spoke. "That's exactly what our house looked like," Miguel finally said. "A week ago." I watched as Guillermo's front door opened. The old man stepped out, blinking in the sunlight. He was carrying some cans of food. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. He did not look our way. He just shuffled to his car, put the cans inside, and shuffled back to his house. Before he went in, he paused at the door. For just a second, he looked up at the sky. Even from this distance, I could see the fear in his eyes. Then he disappeared inside, and the door closed behind him. "We didn't send them away," I said. "We just moved them, pushed them somewhere else." Miguel did not respond. He did not have to. We had not saved ourselves. We had not freed Rosa or the children. We had simply passed our nightmare on to someone else. 6 months have passed since that night. I am writing this from my apartment in Mexico City, sitting at the same desk where I work every day. Everything looks normal. But I know now that normal is just a word we use to describe the spaces between nightmares. My mother still lives in that house. She refused to leave. But she has made changes. Every light stays on from sunset to sunrise. The electricity bill has tripled, but none of us complain. The cats came back the morning after the spirits left. They act as if those dark days never happened. But sometimes late at night I catch them staring at corners of the room where nothing visible stands. Miguel and I still take turns staying with her, though not every night anymore. Once a week, sometimes twice. Enough to remind her that she is not alone. Lucia finished her first year of university. She moved into a new apartment with 2 roommates instead of 1. She says she feels safer with more people around. She does not talk about what happened at the vacation house or what she saw that night in our mother's living room, but I noticed that she never sleeps with the lights off anymore. Elena transferred to a different university in another city. She and Lucia still text sometimes, but they never talk about that weekend. Some memories are too heavy to share. Daniel stayed. He is still with Lucia, still by her side. He does not fully understand what happened, but he believes. He saw enough to believe. As for me, I have healed, physically at least. The gash on my forehead left a thin white scar. My wife asked about it once, and I told her I fell. But the psychological wounds do not heal the same way. I have nightmares now. I dream of standing in that hallway surrounded by pale children with hollow eyes. I dream of their cold fingers closing around my wrists, my ankles, my throat. 3 weeks ago, I was brushing my teeth at 2 a.m. The apartment was quiet. I stood at the sink staring at my reflection in the mirror, And then I saw her, just for a moment. A small figure standing behind me reflected in the glass. Pale skin, white dress, dark hair plastered to her skull. I spun around. There was no one there. I looked back at the mirror. Only my own reflection stared back at me, but for just a second my reflection had not looked like me. The eyes had been different, sadder, lonelier, like the eyes of someone who had been waiting a very long time to be seen. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Or maybe the connection is not as severed as we thought. Guillermo died 2 weeks after the spirits left our house. They found him in his bedroom, his eyes wide open and staring at the ceiling. Heart failure, they said. Natural causes. But I know better. I saw his face the day before he died. He had the look of a man who had seen something that broke him. His house was sold within a month. A young couple bought it with a toddler and another baby on the way. They were excited about the neighborhood, about the good schools nearby. I wanted to warn them, but what could I say? They lasted 6 weeks. One night I saw the husband loading suitcases into their car at 3 a.m. His wife was in the passenger seat holding their toddler, her face streaked with tears. They drove away and never came back. The house sat empty for months. Until last week, I was driving past when I saw a moving truck in the driveway, another family, a mother and father with 2 children who looked about 10 and 12. The father noticed me watching. He walked over to my car, a friendly smile on his face, and asked if I was lost. I told him I used to know the man who lived here. I told him the neighborhood was very quiet. He thanked me and went back to his family. I watched him pick up a box and carry it inside, still smiling. That night I drove past the house again. It was after midnight. I looked up at the second-floor window. The light was on, and silhouetted against the curtain I could see 2 shapes. One small, the height of a child. One smaller, still standing directly behind it, watching. I am telling you this story because someone needs to know. The spirits we encountered are not gone. They are simply somewhere else, tormenting someone else, waiting to be seen. If you are listening to this, I need you to pay attention. If you ever come home and find that your pets refuse to enter, if you ever turn on the lights and feel a sadness so profound it brings you to your knees, if you ever hear whispered prayers in the darkness, do not ignore it. Do not convince yourself it is just stress or imagination. Call someone, tell someone, get out. Because once they find you, they do not let go easily. They are hungry for connection, desperate for acknowledgement, starving for the love they were denied when they died unnamed and unbaptized. My mother still lights a candle every night for Rosa. She placed a small frame on her altar with a single word written in careful script, Rosa, the sister she never knew. I do not know if Rosa is at peace now. I do not know if she found what she was looking for. But I know that when I close my eyes at night, I can still hear them. The countless children who died before their time, before they could be named, before anyone could tell them they were loved. So I'm asking you now, have you ever felt something watching you in the darkness? Have you ever heard whispers in an empty room? Have you ever seen a reflection in the mirror that did not quite match the face you expected to see? Tell me. Leave a comment. Share your story. Because if this is happening to you, you are not alone, and you need help. And whatever you do tonight when you go to sleep, leave the lights on. Trust me, leave the lights on. Cordero de Dios que quita el pecado del mundo, ten piedad de nosotros. Have mercy on us.